AITA for sleeping with my husband's best friend in our bed while he worked nights to pay for my shopping addiction? I know how the title sounds. I know what you're all thinking. But please hear me out before you tear me apart in the comments. This situation is so much more complicated than it appears, and I'm genuinely lost about whether I'm the villain here or if there's more to the story than meets the eye. The background. My name is Sarah, and I've been married to David for 7 years. We met in college. He was this sweet, earnest business major who worked 2 jobs to pay his tuition, and I was an art student drowning in student loans but living my best life. David always said he fell for my free spirit and how I could find beauty in everything. Back then, that meant thrift store finds and turning our tiny apartment into something magical with fairy lights and plants I'd rescued from dumpsters. Fast forward to now, and that free spirit has apparently morphed into what David calls a shopping addiction. I prefer to think of it as an appreciation for beautiful things. And okay, maybe I do get a little carried away sometimes. But can you blame me? After years of wearing second-hand everything and eating ramen for dinner, suddenly having access to real money felt intoxicating. David landed this incredible job at a tech startup 3 years ago. Suddenly, we went from scraping by to having actual disposable income. We bought our dream house, this gorgeous Victorian in the historic district with original hardwood floors and a clawfoot tub I'd fantasized about since I was 12. For the first time in my adult life, I could walk into a store and buy something just because I loved it. And I loved a lot of things. The shopping problem. It started innocently enough. A vintage leather jacket here, some handmade ceramics there. I justified every purchase. We could afford it now, right? David had worked so hard to get us here, and didn't we deserve to enjoy the fruits of his labor? But somewhere along the way, enjoying became needing. The thrill of finding the perfect piece, the way my heart raced when I discovered something unique, it became like a drug. Online shopping made it even worse. Late at night, when David was already asleep, I'd scroll through boutique websites, curating my cart like it was a museum collection. The packages started arriving daily. David would come home to find our porch crowded with boxes, our credit card statements growing thicker each month. At first, he was patient. He'd shake his head and make jokes about needing to build another closet. But as the months passed and the numbers climbed, those jokes turned into concerned conversations. "Sarah, we need to talk about this," he'd say, sitting me down at our kitchen table with printouts of our statements. "Last month you spent more than some people make in salary. I'd promised to cut back, to be more mindful. And I'd try, really I would. But then I'd see something, a hand-woven throw that would be perfect for our reading nook, or a vintage brass mirror that would complete our bedroom, and my resolve would crumble." Enter Marcus. Marcus Chen had been David's best friend since middle school. While David was the steady, responsible one, Marcus was the charmer, quick with a joke, effortlessly confident, the kind of guy who could talk his way into anywhere. He was a freelance photographer, traveling constantly for shoots, documenting fashion weeks and celebrity parties. His Instagram was a carefully curated feed of beautiful people in beautiful places, and his stories always seemed to feature some new adventure. When Marcus was in town, he'd crash in our guest room, an arrangement that had worked perfectly fine for years. David loved having his best friend around, and honestly, so did I. Marcus brought energy to our house, stories from the outside world, a sense that life could be spontaneous and exciting. But something changed after David started working nights. The startup David worked for landed a massive contract with a company in Singapore. To accommodate the time difference and manage the project personally, David volunteered to switch to a night shift schedule. He'd leave for work at 8 p.m. and return home around 7 a.m., sleeping through most of the day. "It's temporary," he assured me. 6 months, maybe 8. The overtime pay will help us get ahead on the mortgage and maybe fund that kitchen renovation you've been dreaming about. What he didn't say, but what we both knew, was that the overtime would also help cover my increasingly expensive shopping habits. The loneliness. Those first few weeks of David's night schedule were brutal. Our beautiful house felt cavernous and cold without him. I'd eat dinner alone, watch Netflix alone, go to bed alone. The silence was deafening, and shopping became my companion. If I couldn't have David's company, at least I could surround myself with beautiful things. That's when Marcus started staying over more frequently. David's barely here anyway, he reasoned when he showed up with his camera bag and that easy smile. I'm between apartments, and honestly, I could use the company too. This place is too big for one person. He wasn't wrong. Having Marcus there made the house feel alive again. He'd cook elaborate dinners and insist I join him. He'd put on music and dance around the kitchen while doing dishes. When I showed him my latest purchases, he didn't lecture me about budgets, he admired the craftsmanship, understood the appeal, made me feel like my taste was sophisticated rather than compulsive. David doesn't appreciate your eye, he said one evening as I modeled a vintage Diane von Furstenberg dress I'd found on an estate sale website. This is art. You're curating a lifestyle, creating beauty. There's nothing wrong with that. It felt so good to have someone understand, someone who didn't make me feel guilty for wanting beautiful things. The shift. I can pinpoint the exact moment things changed between Marcus and me. It was a Thursday night in October. David had been gone for about 3 hours, and I was in our bedroom, arranging my latest purchases, some silk scarves that I'd convinced myself were investment pieces. Marcus appeared in the doorway with 2 glasses of wine. "Fashion show?" he asked, nodding toward the scarves draped across our bed. "I'm trying to figure out how to display them," I said, taking the wine gratefully. "They're too beautiful to just stuff in a drawer." Marcus set down his glass and picked up one of the scarves, a gorgeous Hermes piece in deep emerald with a pattern of golden chains. Without asking, he draped it around my neck, his fingers brushing against my skin as he arranged it. "Perfect," he murmured, and when I looked up, he was closer than he'd ever been before. The kiss happened so naturally that for a moment, I didn't even register what was occurring. His lips were soft, tasting of wine and possibility. When I finally pulled back, my heart was racing in a way that had nothing to do with shopping. "Marcus, we can't." "Can't what?" He stepped closer, his hand still tangled in the silk scarf around my neck. "Can't acknowledge what's been building between us for months. Can't admit that you're lonely and I'm here and David is. David is my husband. David is working himself to death to fund your shopping sprees and falling asleep before you can even have a real conversation." The words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. David and I barely saw each other anymore. When he came home in the mornings, I was getting ready for my part-time job at an art gallery. When I got home in the afternoons, he was sleeping. Our only real interaction was the notes we left for each other on the kitchen counter and the increasingly tense conversations about money. But Marcus was there. Marcus listened when I talked about the artists I was working with at the gallery. Marcus noticed when I changed my hair or wore something new. Marcus made me feel seen. The affair. I wish I could say it was a one-time mistake, a moment of weakness that I immediately regretted. But that would be a lie, and I've been telling myself enough lies already. The affair lasted 3 months. Marcus would wait until David left for work, then come to my room. We'd make love in the bed I shared with my husband, surrounded by all the beautiful things I'd accumulated. Afterward, we'd lie there talking about everything: art, travel, dreams, the future. He'd tell me stories about the glamorous world he moved through, the celebrities and socialites and jet-setters. He made my life feel small and mundane by comparison, but also made me feel like I deserved more. "You should come with me to Paris next month," he said one night, tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. "There's this amazing vintage market in Montmartre, And I'm shooting a fashion spread there anyway. You'd love it. The idea was intoxicating. Paris, with Marcus, surrounded by vintage treasures and cobblestone streets and cafe culture. A world away from budget spreadsheets and guilt about credit card statements. But it was also impossible, and we both knew it. David would never. David doesn't have to know. Tell him it's a girl's trip, or a work thing. You deserve to see the world, Sarah. You deserve to be with someone who appreciates all of you. The way he said all of you made it clear he wasn't just talking about my shopping habits. The discovery. The night everything fell apart started like any other. David left for work at 8, kissing me goodbye with that tired smile that had become his default expression. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later with takeout from our favorite Thai place. We ate dinner, drank wine, talked about a photography exhibition Marcus was planning. Around 11, we moved to the bedroom. I'd gotten a new silk nightgown that afternoon, a beautiful champagne-colored.